Thank you very much. Okay. Thanks a lot. Sorry. Thanks a lot for the very kind introduction, the warm welcome, and also the invitation to speak here today. Fortunately, it's not me who's building national or regional strategies. It's rather me who's working with people who are building them and thinking about how to build them better and how to build them more responsibly. So I wanted to clear that first. And yeah, although I do research on responsible quantum computing, which is broadly speaking another way of saying quantum ethics, I do that work at IBM Research. Today I want to speak about work that is kind of a result out of doing research on responsible quantum computing. Namely that I also work together with different international institutions on quantum governance, and don't, to the technologists in the room, please don't shriek or run now, because I know typically it's governance and then we tend to think it hinders innovation and we run away. But this is really forms of soft governance that are starting to happen around quantum computing now. And I want today in this talk, I want to highlight how we can build regional and national quantum strategies with a focus on responsible development and deployment. So why is this so important, and why should we be thinking about it? You might all have seen a variation of this map behind me. If you haven't, take a look. I know it's not the perfect keynote slide, but bear with me. What you're seeing here is actually the investments in quantum computing around the globe. Not in quantum computing, in quantum technologies around the globe. And if you carefully look as to where the points, I mean, the figures are all over the place, but if you carefully look as to where the points are distributed, you will very quickly realize that they're actually in the quote-unquote global north. So, and this is from a report that was done a year ago. 2023, a year ago. And so what we're seeing actually is that already, although we've just started with quantum, we're already seeing the risk of exacerbating the digital divide that we're having in classical computing, that we're redoing the same again with quantum computing. And so but at the same time, we're at the start, as you will have heard all over the day, we're at the start with quantum computing. So we could do things differently, and that is actually one of the core motivations as to why people are starting to think around governance and how to govern and how to possibly redistribute also access to quantum computing from the start. Because I've listed all the possible negative implications here. Investment, yes, of course, that means no industry, possibly no industry, but of course you have the trickle-down effect of if you don't invest, you won't, first of all, don't have education, you don't have research. That means industry development likely is not going to happen, basically saying it's very unlikely that quantum ecosystems will form in a country, and also that the entire environment won't kind of develop around quantum. So really there's a proactive approach necessary. One proactive approach I wanted to highlight is the Open Quantum Institute. You heard that I have some ties to it, so it's also no surprise that I'm highlighting it, but also even if I didn't have ties, it would be the statement would still be true, that it's actually the first institution and the only one that is trying to really actively work against the gap that is forming by giving access to quantum computing, redistributing access to quantum computing to those who otherwise couldn't afford it, but not only access, but also working on doing quantum applications for good, so towards the SDGs, and importantly, education. Because one of the biggest education of policymakers, and this is where the tie to regional and national strategy is coming in. What we're seeing, what is actually really, really important is that although in countries like Germany, our policymakers tend to be relatively well educated around the importance of quantum, and one of the reasons we're having this and we're so many people here is a result of that. However, in a lot of other countries with very different national priorities and also challenges, the education is just not happening. So that is actually a very, very important first step, that policymakers are being made aware of what quantum is all about, what the timelines are around quantum, why it is worthy to invest either in direct quantum research or research around the ecosystem and the applications of quantum computing. And so there's the multilateral governance report on quantum computing for the SDGs. And the reason I'm highlighting is this was co-written together with diplomats that work at the UN. So this is not just a paper by sort of a think tank out of the blue, but really sort of by policymakers, almost for policymakers. And this is one of the steps kind of towards enabling people to building a responsible regional and or national quantum strategy. So the strategy document that today I want to talk about has been based on what has been mentioned before, the quantum computing governance principles. And this is a report that was published already in 2022. And interestingly, it was the World Economic Forum that realized, oh, there's a gap. We're not talking about governance of quantum computing. We need to bring together a group of people and think about what this, how can we govern this technology? How can we avoid the same pitfalls that we have had with other technologies? And so what was really interesting is that also this report, and it was a very diverse group of people, from technology experts to some policy folks to members of the World Economic Forum, got together and said, well, in order to speak about quantum governance, we need to define what are the core values that we want to advance with governance. What are kind of the core values and what are the core themes? So what you're seeing here, and you'll see this all of kind of as a red thread running through my presentation, what we're seeing here are the core values in the middle, and these core values should influence the core themes that lie around it. The reason I'm emphasizing this is that typically with other sort of national and regional strategy documents, you typically don't tend to think of values first, but they're implicit and they're not as explicit. So this was really explicitly focused around the values. And if you look at them, really important values as well, I think a lot of values that we wished we would have had with other technologies from the start. So values such as transparency. I think we can all think of, being here at the AI Summit, we wish we had thought of AI, transparency and AI from the start, but also the common good, accessibility, non-maleficence, equitability, and so on. They're not new values. They seem very kind of straightforward, and you wonder why is it worth highlighting, but actually having them embedded right from the start around these core themes was non-straightforward in the discussions, and there was a lot of discussion around this. So that was kind of the starting point, and essentially the quantum computing governance principles were a call to action. So there were suggestions, they were highlighting what are the challenges in these areas, what are the opportunities with quantum, and what could you be doing. So they were asking policymakers to kind of take these challenges and realize that and then implement it into national strategies. However, it was then also realized that it's easier said than done to build national strategies. There's around 22 countries that have national strategies. And to no one's surprise, these 22 countries tend to be the 22 countries, or the countries that also invest already a lot on quantum computing. So then the World Economic Forum said, well, that's also not really, if you look at the gap again that is forming, how can we enable or assist those who would like to build a quantum strategy, but don't have all the resources. They don't have a quantum a ministry that even cares about quantum. They don't have people in the policy departments that could kind of help formulate a strategy. Couldn't we help them kind of build these strategies or learn from the existing strategies? And that's essentially sort of the exercise that started the second report, which really is a blueprint for building a national or regional quantum strategy. So again, this was a multi-stakeholder process. And essentially what we did is that we looked at existing national and regional strategies, and we tried to formulate them into building blocks. Because as we know that, there would be no point in saying, oh, well, the UK has done this, everyone go copy the UK, because the UK is very specific. They're no longer part of the EU. They have a very specific already history in quantum computing. There's also no point in going to say, oh, Germany has the strategy, go copy Germany, because what Germany does doesn't apply to, say, South Korea or Brazil. So the idea was to build building blocks. And yeah, I've mentioned that, to have these building blocks centered around, and this is where you see the wheel again, taking the values from the governing principles, centering around the themes that were already identified, and then per each theme having building blocks. So essentially you can see the first report was this is what would be great to be done, and the second one was a kind of a little bit more of a how-to. This is how you could be doing, how you could be building your strategy. And really the idea here is to give examples, to kind of inspire, to make it, hopefully kind of break strategies down, make it easier. and thereby also encourage, by having these values underlying from the start, encouraging the responsible development of these strategies, and also having kind of responsibilities and values in these strategies from the get-go. So just looking at it closer, I'm really doing you a favor. You don't have to read the report afterwards anymore. So if you look at it closer, what was done also is that these building blocks, they were mapped onto a timeline, because we also realized while writing that actually countries are at very, very, very different stages of their thinking around quantum computing or quantum technologies more broadly. Some countries haven't even started or are just kind of curious, so they would be in the first stage. Other countries have initial thoughts. Then again, the next type of country, they will have a sort of strategy, but they don't have funding committed to that strategy. There is a few countries like the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, Australia, they have a strategy and funding committed to it. And then there is countries, of course, who have a strategy, funding, and who are already implementing the strategy. So these are kind of the five kind of time zones, or like that you see at the top. And so what we did is that we mapped kind of the different building blocks of the themes to these time zones. So essentially, you have to ask yourself, if you're building for a region or a nation, you ask yourself, well, where am I in my quantum journey? Am I starting to be curious about quantum? If yes, I'm in the first column, and this is kind of the building blocks that apply to me. This is the steps I should be taking, and this is the steps I should be integrating in my strategy. Am I in the third one? I have an initial strategy. What are other steps that other countries have been doing that I could also now add to my strategy that could potentially also help me to get funding and implement it? So this, as an example, this is a I won't go through each of the steps, but just to kind of outline how the building blocks were structured. So I want to now take a kind of close-up look into three themes of the report. The first one being open innovation, to give you an idea of what it looks like and what we mean by building blocks. So open innovation, the goal, of course, is to ensure collaboration, that collaboration is encouraged, and that fast and responsible development of notice here, fast and responsible development of quantum technologies and their application. And so the first building block for that is encouraging collaboration and in a pre-competitive environment. The second one would be to have trade strategies. The third one, to have a public and private sector innovation strategy. And the fourth, to have strategies around technology transfer and commercialization of the technology. And so with each of these, we then also gave best practice examples. So to kind of also highlight that this is not that it's been done kind of at a desk and we just thought about it, we tied it very closely to case studies where this has been done, and this is a case study from the US, I believe, for their open innovation strategy. The second theme I want to kind of highlight, to give an example and also come back to what I said earlier, that this is not just about like hard governance, but is that to start with the governance and the responsible innovations theme. Even I hear a lot of people saying, well, we're not yet there yet with the technology that we can talk about regulation. And that's great, and that's true as well. And we shouldn't over-regulate where we don't have technology yet, and we're still in the research areas. But what we can do is we can define our common values. And we can kind of start with that inner gray circle that I've been showing before, and we can define as a nation, as a region. I mean, I know there's a lot of regional representatives here as well. We can define what are the values and what are the things that we do want to achieve with quantum technologies, and what are maybe the things we do not want to achieve with quantum technologies, what are the kind of unintended impacts. From that, there's a lot of responsible innovation. Responsible innovation is not something new. How can we operationalize that within our quantum projects? How can we, when we do calls for funding, how can we integrate responsible innovation when we attribute money? How can we, in the decision frameworks, how can we integrate it? If we're a company and we're deciding about use cases, how can we integrate responsible innovation strategies and thinking about them responsibly within our use case selection, and so forth? And then the third one, well, it has to come sooner or later, is technology enabling regulation. And then finally, also standardization strategies. And then the third topic I want to emphasize is around sustainability. That was a really important topic to those who contributed to writing this. Is around, first of all, having strategies for sustainable quantum technologies, but also strategies for energy consumption benchmarks, as well as incentivization strategies for sustainability use cases. And I want to emphasize that because I often find there's kind of sustainable quantum and quantum for sustainability. And we need to think about them both. Often there's a reflex, and it's not a bad reflex, but from what we're seeing in HPC is that we're thinking, oh, but these quantum computers, they're going to consume so much energy. We just need to kind of regulate around their energy consumption. And often there's a misconception that actually, no, they'll be far more efficient. They'll be solving these problems more efficiently. And so we're probably likely to consume less energy. And so I think there's often this kind of almost negative perception for wrong reasons. Though it is important to benchmark this and to measure this and to make sure that we're being more energy efficient in solving certain problems. But also that we're using quantum for good, that we identify for sustainability, that we're identifying the use cases around, say, materials discovery that are really helping us to find solutions against the climate crisis. And so with that, this is just an example. As you saw, there's 9 themes in the entire report, and I won't bore you and go into each of them, but I think you understood the way it is structured, and the hope is that countries are actually using this, or countries or regions or even across countries are using that together to be able to formulate their strategy. And since this was published in January this year, and since then there is actually countries that are kind of pilot countries that are now using that, that trying to build their own strategy based on this. And there's then going to be a readout also of their success and their learnings around it, and to kind of the idea is to continuously improve this so that it can actually be kind of a learning exercise, and that even on this high kind of level, strategy level, there can be an exchange of knowledge. So sort of initial reflections from the process before I close, and I'm curious to hear your questions, is that, of course, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. That is very clear, and often one thinks kind of strategy is universally applicable, and with quantum strategies or technology strategies, it's very clear that we have different starting points, we're at different level of advancements, but also there's different regional and national priorities. Also, what is really, really important and often underemphasized is how important a good self-reflection is. There's certain countries, so for instance, Morocco has a really, 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 really strong fertilizer industry. So that gives them a hold of very great use cases for quantum computing. And so kind of identifying as a country or region, what is my existing technology and what can I actually leverage for quantum is a very good starting point. Finally, opportunity to learn from the past. So that goes back to what I mentioned about values. So values that possibly weren't integrated from the start, integrating them from the start and making sure that they're integrated with leverage, and that there's ways to govern around these values as well, and that they're not just kind of empty words on a sheet of paper, but then aren't being enforced. And finally, sort of starting with pilots to test the usability of these kinds of blueprints, is something that is kind of ongoing, but an interesting approach. And sure whether I should be saying that, but I'm also surprised that countries are taking this kind of. It's a risk, right? To be a pilot and writing a national strategy on quantum technologies. It's such a sensitive technology that I wouldn't have thought that countries are actually volunteering to do so, and to also then, share their learnings of the journey. But as this is ongoing, that risk is being taken. So with that, I hope I gave you a glimpse into kind of what it takes and what the building blocks of a national strategy or regional strategy are, and look forward to your questions.